Freshly launched late August 2021, Warhammer Plus most certainly started with a bit of a bang, no small thanks to a previous IP policy update and its impact on fan animations. This topic has been extensively covered elsewhere, what I am going to focus on instead is what Warhammer Plus has to offer to its subscribers 1 month in. Over the course of the video, I will quickly touch on why I decided to become a Warhammer Plus subscriber, then go through the different contents and how I rate them so far, before concluding with my overall rating. Most importantly though, this coverage is spoiler-free past the most very basics. Enjoy! Welcome to SwissHammer, your channel for modeling in Warhammer 40k. My name is Tammer and I will be guiding you through this video. To give a little background information on where I stand with the hobby, I've been quite invested into the Warhammer 40k tabletop since 3rd edition, when I started with a Dark Angel Space Marine army. These days I am playing 9th edition with Deathwatch, though I have an interest in several of the Imperial factions. Over the years I've also been invested in several of the video games, such as the Dawn of War series, Space Marine and Space Hulk games in particular. I am primarily a PC gamer, all the mobile games have never really appealed to me. Furthermore, I am very much into the lore, having read the entirety of the Horus Heresy and most other miniseries and generally books around the Imperial factions. I am infrequently watching battle reps and even less frequently watching animations. This is mainly due to my personal preference to rather be active myself. Hopefully, this brief profile will give you some additional context and perhaps an idea on how to decide about picking Warhammer Plus or not. So what does Warhammer Plus have to offer at this point? The main categories are as following. First, we have the Warhammer 40k app, which includes access to rules and datasheets, assuming you have the corresponding codex, as well as an army list building tool called Battleforge. This app has been previously available and basically got merged into this new service. My initial interest for this was high and I have already been a subscriber. There is also an Age of Sigmar app to come, or already in the beta as we speak if I'm not mistaken. As I'm not doing any Age of Sigmar coverage, I won't be reviewing this one. We then have the infamous exclusive animations. My initial interest for these was medium. As I mentioned earlier, I've never been much into this kind of content, but I considered myself to be open for something official. Furthermore, we have the weekly shows, including painting tutorials, battle reps and lore masters. My initial interest for this was medium to high, primarily due to the lore elements, but also because I was very curious about how the painting tutorials and especially the battle reps will do when compared to all the established YouTube channels run by the fanbase. To round things up, we then have the Vault, which is basically a digital archive containing books and magazines. My interest in this was high, simply because I enjoy reading a lot. Lastly, there are the exclusive minis, though I hesitate to include them in the offer, as I personally consider them more of a bonus rather than something affecting my decision about subscribing or not. I won't lie though, I'm certainly not unhappy about eventually getting the Assassin. All in all, my high hopes for the app as well as overall interest and genuine curiosity about the shows sealed the deal for me. So 1 month in, how do I rate the different categories so far? Starting with the Warhammer 40k app, this is both my greatest hope and my greatest disappointment. Prior to making this video, I did a little digging and found out that I started using Battlescribe back in November 2011. Loved it ever since, but nonetheless, I was in fact thrilled when Games Workshop announced their official app. As much as I like third party, I had my hopes up that through official means we would get something accurate, reliable and with additional features. But over a year later, I'm somewhat at a loss as to why it is still in such an underwhelming state. As far as I'm concerned, I find it to be unreliable, counterintuitive to use and still lacking features when compared to Battlescribe. Perhaps I'm just unlucky with Deathwatch as my main army, but there are to this day points errors, invalid weapon combinations and frequent crashes. If anything, I expected such an official app to bring clarity about what the valid loadouts are, not further confusion. As far as I'm concerned, I would expect one of two things to happen at this point. Either they sincerely invest into development and polishing in order to justify the locking of datasheets behind codex purchases. If the app itself offers enough for the armies I actually play and buy a codex for, fine, but currently it simply does not. The alternative would be to unlock all datasheets for subscribers. That way, the army builder would still be close to useless, but one could at least use it to quickly look up units from other armies that I'm not familiar with while playing a game. Either way, this one is currently a failure as far as I'm concerned. Moving on to the animations, this is where it gets spicy. What we currently have are two series, one being the much anticipated Angels of Death and the other being Hammer and Bolter. I'll be completely honest here, I approached this with a lot of negative bias. First of all, I expected Angels of Death to be the overly hyped cash cow that all the kids go for. I admit I was completely wrong on this, and it only took about 10 minutes into the series to change my mind. To give the briefest of overviews, it's Blood Angels versus Gene Stealers, and the visuals are done in a very distinctive black and white style with red mixed in. One of the main characters originally served in the Deathwatch, which is a nice extra touch for Deathwatch players like myself. While I found the presence of the Deathwatch Pauldron to be at odds with the lore at first, I think this was perhaps done to make the character stand out more easily among his brethren. As far as I understand, upon a return from the service in the Deathwatch, what they keep is an icon placed on their chapter shoulder pad, not the whole Deathwatch shoulder pad itself. That aside, we also have Emma Gregory voicing the ship mistress. As far as I'm concerned, she's easily among my top 3 voice actors for Black Library audio dramas. As I'm making this video, I'm 5 episodes into this series now, having reached its mid-season finale, and I cannot wait for it to continue. The animations are great, an overall good mix between story and action. I highly recommend it, especially when you're into Deathwatch, Blood Angels or Space Marines in general. We then also have Hammer and Bolter, which is an anthology series featuring short stories with various characters. The advantage here, of course, is that if a single episode is a miss, it doesn't have so much impact on the overall series, and over time, there should be stories and characters that appeal to pretty much everyone. I'm not that fond of the animation style of this series, but it's entertaining enough to watch. While I think that they did a really good job by starting with these two different formats, what I have to say though is that overall, I'm not much into watching series. For me personally, getting 1 or 2 episodes every week, or even every second week, is perfectly fine. I don't have any Netflix or similar subscriptions. I just don't have the time to watch more. If you are expecting hours and hours of animation content, this is nowhere near there yet. But anyway, for me personally, I rate this part of Warhammer Plus as top notch. Moving on to the weekly shows, as I'm making this video, there have been 2 battle reports, 1 Lore Master episode, and 4 painting tutorials made available. Starting with the battle reports, as I mentioned earlier, I was really curious about how they would produce these in order to compete with some of the established YouTube channels. Turns out they ended up with a surprisingly compact format, the perks of doing a pre-recorded show rather than a live stream, I guess. Basically, they get a narrative game at above 2k points down to about 1.5 hours, and a 1k points matched play game to about half an hour. They do this by cleverly fast forwarding the less interesting parts, including some deployment, movement and dice roll parts that would take up a lot of time when played in real time. Instead, they focus on the highlights of the games, take some extra time to explain what is going on, on and show pop-ups on screen that describe abilities or stratagems that are being used. One of the issues I personally have with the channels that live stream the games is that it ends up being too much banter and downtime for me personally, and I basically have to dig through 4-hour streams to find the few tactical highlights that interest me. I fully realize that this mainly boils down to my personal preference. Some people enjoy watching live, being able to ask in chat and socialize with the community, while I simply want the compact highlights. As it turns out, the format on Warhammer Plus is a lot more appealing to me in that regard, though I suspect that there are most likely fan-made YouTube channels that go along those same lines. If you guys have any recommendations in that regard, I would love to hear them. For the Lore Master episode about Abaddon the Despoiler, it was well narrated, easy to just listen to without watching the screen, and I also think that they did a good job focusing on the relevant highlights. I think I can confidently say that I have read the books involved in that part of the lore, and the coverage matched with that without losing itself into too many details. Then lastly, the painting tutorials. I think they are doing a great job explaining the different steps, and I especially like how they are doing high resolution close-up shots of the models, as it really helps a painting novice like me to see what is going on, though I would say that for this particular topic there is lots and lots of free content available that covers this. Won't need a subscription-based service for this as far as I'm concerned. But all in all, I rate this part of Warhammer Plus as great, with the battle report so far having been my personal highlight of this category. Finally, we have the Vault, where they currently released several lore extracts, White Dwarf magazines and supplements, ranging between 2019 and June 2021. My guess is that they will always be a handful of months behind the most recent White Dwarf releases, which for me personally is more than good enough, aka I don't think I will be buying White Dwarf magazines anymore. I very infrequently purchase them anyway, mainly when there was Deathwatch content or free Warhammer video games to be had, but given that they get uploaded to the Vault with a few months delay now, I will most likely just stick to that. Overall, my rating of this one will depend on the time between new releases and their upload to the Vault. I haven't found an official statement about this, but if it remains at 3 months or less, I will give this part of Warhammer Plus a good rating as well. All in all, for me personally, 1 month into the subscription, I would conclude my review as following. Somewhat unsurprisingly, the Warhammer 40k app fails to deliver. I must admit that I expected much more from this, but as it currently stands, it's both unreliable and unstable when compared to Battlescribe, and GW really needs to step up their game on this one. Until they do, I personally think that a fair compensation for the subscribers would be free access to all the Codex datasheets until the day they actually offer a properly functioning app. Between Angels of Death and Hammer and Bolter, I think they've managed to start the animations with the good mixture of having one with a continuous plot and the other being an anthology with various characters that can appeal to a larger crowd. Overall, I think both series are of good quality, and it will be interesting to see how they expand this area of Warhammer Plus further. To sidetrack for just a moment, this area has created a lot of controversy because of the mess with the update to the IP guidelines, and looking at things 1 month in, I think GW has done themselves a disservice here. The content they have could easily coexist with fan-made content, and I don't think that one takes away from the other. Anyway, as I mentioned in the opening, this is not the topic of this video, but it certainly left a sour taste while reviewing as far as I'm concerned. Still, looking at the animations objectively, I think they are doing a great job at this so far. For the weekly shows, my personal highlights so far have been the battle reports, which to me manage to walk that fine line between tolerable duration, fast forwarding some slower parts of the game, and still explaining the important key moments. Great job on this one, GW. I also like the lore masters and painting tutorials, but for these I could very easily go elsewhere as well. But anyway, if you share my dislike for 4 hours live streamed battle reports, I encourage to give this format a try instead. Great job in this category as well. Then lastly, the Vault provides access to even more lore, as well as White Dwarf magazines, with a current backlog of about 3 months. If they continue to upload at this rate, I will consider this reason enough to not buy them directly upon release, but I will withhold a rating at this point until that has become clear. Based on this, Warhammer Plus currently gets my recommendation. I do like the quality of the majority of the content, though I acknowledge that the quantity of the content might be a concern to some. I've mentioned this regarding animations, but it goes for the service as a whole. For me personally, an animation episode and a random second element per week is more than enough. I don't have the time to watch more, and I think the monthly pricing for this amount of content is fair. However, amount of content and price is something you must judge based on your own circumstances. I suspect that I am very likely at the lower end of consumption in that regard. As it currently is, you certainly won't be getting Netflix or Disney Plus amount of content, and I doubt we ever will. With that being said, what I would like to see in the future. First of all, I would really love a polished Warhammer 40k app. As far as I'm concerned, this remains such a missed opportunity. With the digital codes found in the printed new codex releases and the frequency of FAQs they are releasing, they have this chance to provide an easy access to updated and accurate rules that are official. For the animations, it will be interesting to see how they are branching out with additional series and the frequency of releases. Being a Space Marines player myself, I greatly enjoy Angels of Death, but would I think the same when collecting a Xenos army? Based on the various stats available, I am well aware that Imperial players, and especially Space Marines, are a majority, but nonetheless, after all the drama around animations, I think they would do well to make up in this particular category. The battle reports fall into a similar category. I hope that they manage to provide games with a wide range of armies, which in turn would mean higher frequency in order to keep it interesting for as many players as possible. But I would definitely like to see our battle reports timed with new codex releases, especially when there are several releases at once. For instance, a Grey Knights vs Thousand Suns game back when those new books came out. Having said all that, I am planning to revisit Warhammer Plus on my channel once in a while, depending on the frequency of content and then potentially branching out. My original thought is to keep such content always spoiler free, but I have not decided on the format yet, and I could also discuss animations, perhaps in a second half of a video or even a dedicated one for those who have already seen the episodes involved. Let me know if there is any interest for that, and I will give it some further thoughts. So that's it for my review of the first month of Warhammer Plus. Are you guys subscribed to the service already, and how are you liking it so far? And if not, are you planning to subscribe anytime soon, or are you rather sitting this one out? Let me know in the comments. Finally, I would also like to mention that there is a SwissHammer Facebook page where I will be posting links to my videos as well as articles I find of interest. I do read a lot about the hobby, but not all of it will always end up as its own video. I look forward to seeing you there as well. I do also have a Patreon page. If you like my content, any additional support is greatly appreciated as it helps me invest into future videos. As always, thank you very much for watching, guys. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. I hope you have been enjoying this video. Give me a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks again, and see you next time.